Hey everyone, welcome to Tech Bytes Takeover, as I like to call it, Between Two Geese. I'm Tyler Jurgens, Senior Technical Product Marketing Manager here at Veeam. Matt, I gotta come up with a better line than saying that's a long title. Why don't I pass it over to you? Why don't you tell the folks what we're here to talk about today?
Yes, thanks for that intro, Tyler. Thrilled to have everyone joining us today. So for those of you who are the keen eagle-eyed or goose-eyed viewers, you might realize, hey, didn't we just do a show a couple of weeks ago? Well, we are back, right? So this week, what are we talking about? We're talking about 3 challenges that Veeam Data Platform can help you overcome today. But these are things that we actually alluded to last week, or sorry, 2 weeks ago as well, about how they will actually get enhanced or better with 13.1. We'll show you 2 ways that you can level up your Veeam game, as well as one story right from the news, cutting edge, something that's probably going to affect all of us sooner than later. And as well as we're going to actually demystify one term that you're probably hearing more and more. And they kind of correlate those last 2 as well. And lastly, we want to leave you with 0 regrets for tuning in. So throughout all this, we're keeping an eye on the live chat. If you have comments, questions, thoughts, feel free to toss them in there. We'll try to address them as we go along, but we've got a jam-packed show today. So Tyler, why don't you kick us off? What's the story here? What's the news story of the week?
Absolutely, Matt. Thanks for that. And, Jim gives us a hearty honk, and I want to give Jim a hearty honk back there. So, honk to you, Jim. But why don't we jump into our news article here, as Matt said? And what we're going to see is NVIDIA RTX Spark coming to Windows PC. So this is pretty fascinating for me. This is NVIDIA's first CPU coming into the, desktop market. It comes with a bunch of CUDA cores. So we've got all these 6144 Blackwell-based GPUs. Of course, that's the same as what you'll see in the 50 series GPUs. And it's pretty fascinating technology to me, and it really kind of unlocks that AI on the desktop itself, because many of you out there, I've been playing with different AI models locally. I know Matt has been as well. So it's a really fascinating new technology we got coming out here from NVIDIA. And Matt, I know you have a lot of thoughts on this. Tell us, what do you think about this?
Yeah, so I find this interesting in the sense of if you look at where it's targeted, right? It's very much a matter of targeting. I don't want to necessarily say, consumer end users or any specific segment, but this is really about kind of bringing AI on-prem, right? Whether that's in your home office, whether that's in your, work office, wherever that is. So it kind of, speaks to where we are with AI in general. So, today a lot of these things are heavily cloud-based. Yes, you can run your own LLMs locally, but from a everyday user perspective, we're probably leveraging things like Claude or ChatGPT, Codex, and so forth. So this kind of paints the picture of, is this a little bit of a pivot point? Similar to how, several years ago, GPUs were just used for gaming, and then somebody said, hey, these things are really good at math. And next thing you know, everyone was mining for crypto. We were crunching DNA and whatnot, helping with larger projects. But now it's really all about AI. So there's lots of thoughts here, right? Will this AI chip help with GPU shortages? Will it just add to it? But also, what does this mean from a day-to-day usage? Tyler, I know you use a lot of various AI tools for a lot of projects, both work related, some side projects as well. I'd love to hear your take on this.
Absolutely, Matt. It's fascinating what we can do. But when you mentioned like crunching things at home, my thought went right back to SETI at home. I don't know if you remember running that way back in the day.
Hmm.
My blast from the past on that one. But yeah, like the AI models and what you can do now when there's a bunch of different, cloud-based models. You got your Claude, you got your ChatGPT, you got all of those, but you got the local models you can run through Olama or others, and there's various different LLMs that you can run locally at home. And I've been trying those at home here I have a 5070 Ti, so not the top of the line, but I can still do a lot of great things with these AI models. Been loving throwing through, I'll just get AI to do different things. I built myself a bit of an AI factory at home even to generate some AI back and forth through the local models or through Claude or through Codex itself. So really kind of some cool things you can do with that AI. But I want to, ask you, Matt, do you think, and ask our audience, are you starting to incorporate some AI into your work streams? Whether it's through work or whether it's through your home processes. I've built like a couple different Minecraft mods just because my kids love playing Minecraft. I enjoy the modding community there, so why not see what we can do with AI and build that? But that's kind of like just the tip of the iceberg on what you can do with AI. So it's fascinating to think all the different kind of use cases. And Matt, what do you think this really means for like cloud services in general?
Oh, great question. And before we even hop there, I want to address two questions that I see are coming in. So we got Flo on Facebook asking about news about further PVE support. We'll talk about some of that Veeam stuff here shortly. So stay tuned for that. But I also want to bring up a point that, a question that Jeff asks, will this actually make memory and hardware more affordable? And I mean, only time can tell. But on the other hand, is it going to be a matter of all the manufacturers today might start shifting towards these AI specific chips and not really solve the problem? Who knows? So going back to your question, Tyler, as far as what this actually means, as far as, for the cloud services, I don't know. Are they going to be the ones who will be buying these chips up, kind of to Jeff's point, in bulk? And will it just become a scarce sort of commodity for end users? Or will this actually alleviate a lot of these problems and all this computing will be shifted in-house away from the cloud providers? I don't know. But one question that does come to mind for me and probably kind of resonates a little bit with the audience watching this is what does this actually mean from a data resilience standpoint? If all of a sudden you're running all of this AI in-house, you've got dedicated workstations with these specialized chips running AI, maybe they're running agents, it's all agentic. What does that mean for your DR strategy? Is it a matter of all of a sudden, if you lose this desktop, you're losing an entire development team? How are you going to start protecting that? So it's something to really start considering. This kind of moves away from the traditional, oh, this is just, a large SQL server, this is a VM, to, hey, this really starts to paint the picture and bridge that gap between data resilience and what it actually means for the organization. So, Tyler, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts on any of that.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, Matt. We don't really know what this is all going to work out as, but I've seen a lot of this stuff come and go in the past, and I think we're going to see a mix, right? There's going to be a lot more AI done in-house on your desktops, on your workstations, and we're still going to have all those cloud-generated models that are going to be great to use and give us a lot of value, right? But I think we've talked about this a little bit. What else is coming along? A couple weeks ago, we talked a little bit about Veeam, and you can see here we've got still a lot of that Veeam going on. We got, London Veeam was just yesterday, and Sydney is coming up at the end of July here as well. So please check it out, register. And check out the latest episode of Between Two Geese that we did 2 weeks ago. We talked a lot about this. You can see a little bit of the clip of that video itself. Matt, I'm going to toss it back to you so I can bring up the lab here, and I won't be able to talk and type at the same time. So why don't you take it away? Let the folks know what we're going to talk about for a bit here.
Absolutely. So, I've been out and about recently. I was at the Palo Alto Ignite tours in Toronto. Lots of fantastic conversations. Tyler, I know you've been out and about at a few shows recently. So between those shows, between what we heard at Veeam, between even the last episode that we did that Tyler just mentioned, where we talked about some of the things that were announced at Veeam for 13.1, we kind of wanted to take a lot of this stuff and level set a little bit. So we want to talk about, what can you do today in 13? Because 13 was a huge release. And talking to a lot of folks, we came to realize there's things in there that you may not actually be aware of. But we want to tie this back to what can you do today and how does 13.1 actually further that story a little bit more? So, buckle up. We're going to go through a lot here. We'll keep an eye on the comments, across all the platforms, X, Facebook, LinkedIn. Fire those questions off, and we'll try to address them as they come along, as we get them in there. But Tyler, why don't you kick us off here? What are we looking at?
Absolutely. So I want to dive in, and we talked a lot about immutability and a lot about, this threat detection and how we can protect against some of these threats that come in as well. And I want to show, we've got the backup repositories, we've got immutability here. So with by default, the Veeam Software Appliance comes with an immutable repository baked right in, so you don't have to worry about trying to find something else. But if you want something else, we also have that Veeam Data Cloud Vault where you can get that immutable repository directly for that offsite backup. And it's a really great way to make sure that your backups are protected against any of those threats that might try to attack it and try to corrupt your data. Because let's face it, if they get to your backups, you're going to have a rough day. But I want to ask the folks out there, are there features out there that we're just not showing you? Are there things you guys want to see more of? I know there's things that we love to talk about here, but I want to hear from you out there. Is there something you would love to see on a future episode of Between Two Geese, or something you want to see that maybe Matt and I can dive into right now? So we've shown a bit of the immutability, but there was another feature here we wanted to talk about as well, right, Matt?
Absolutely, absolutely. So it all starts with immutability. I know you kind of covered this, right? But at the end of the day, immutability will keep your backups safe from alterations and deletions, but it doesn't really help you when it comes to a clean recovery. It just ensures that you can recover, which is incredibly important, but that's only half the story. You don't want to be reintroducing threats back into the environment. So, that's where a lot of the threat detection comes in, and a little bit of spoilers. Once again, if you saw the keynote at VeeamON New York, it was live streamed. You could go catch the replay. We're actually really doubling down on where and how we can perform threat detection. So we're, expanding what we're doing today, as well as introducing some new workloads that can be protected with this threat detection. Now, Tyler, why don't you walk us through what we're looking at right here?
Absolutely. So what I'm showing here is some of the malware detection settings that we have baked in to 13 a day. So these are things you can see. We're going to see more coming in 13.1 that is going to come soon. We want to show you some of this so that you have a good baseline. You can get ready, you can get prepped, and when 13.1 comes out, you know where to go to get a few of those extra quality of life improvements that we are bringing to you. But here we got the entropy analysis right here. We've got it set to, about normal. But Matt, if I crank it to extreme, what are we going to see with that kind of thing? Like, well, how does that shift for those at home who are watching their backups?
Oh, so this is what I really actually like about this particular feature is it lets you kind of adjust it for the environment in general. So it's looking for signs of entropy. Maybe that's fairly common in your organization, whether it's a home lab, whether it's your enterprise. So if you do a lot of encryption already, maybe you want that sensitivity set to a little bit low to cut down on false positives. On the flip side, maybe you don't actually use encryption a whole heck of a lot. Maybe you just rely on things like, for example, storage level encryption. And if you do see any sort of entropy that's going on within these data blocks as it's being backed up, maybe you want to flag that. So you can actually set it to extreme. So it really gives you that flexibility. But this is just one tool in the tool belt, right? So we've got lots of other things that we can do here. So Tyler, I see you've got the file detection set up. And what I like about this one is it's yet another layer. So the inline will take a look at the blocks as we're processing them, backing them up. This is looking at things from the file level, from the file system level. So, great example here. We're able to pull up things that we know could be potential indicators of compromise. So say you're doing a backup, everything's looking clean. Then the next backup, all of a sudden you find something in this list that might be in there that wasn't there previously. We can actually alert you to that and say, hey, this thing might be valid, but it's also pretty suspicious because it's a known tool that threat actors use. In fact, we align it to the MITRE ATT&CK framework so you could see where it actually lives within that sort of threat detection model. But we also do other things with this, right, Tyler?
Absolutely, Matt. Absolutely. I love the indicators of compromise because, worked in networking, worked in system in for a long time. So I'd use Nmap regularly. And you don't necessarily like Nmap's not a bad tool. You're going to use it to detect stuff to identify your network. But if it also shows up in your backups, and you're not expecting it, that's something you need to dive into, right? And we've also got like the signature protection here with Veeam Threat Hunter, so we can leverage, that machine learning and heuristics to get you more data and more threat detection going on. So we'll identify if any threats peek into there. And we've got that incident API, which I really like because you can integrate this with your security tools. So if a threat is detected, you have that ability to perform a quick backup and get yourself a nice baseline, get yourself something that you can dive into and look more on. And we've got, I got to move through here, Matt. I could talk on that section for a while, but there is only so much time I have with everybody here today. But there is certain area here about, let's do, some scanning of our backups. Is there ability here to dive in and find that clean restore point that Matt had alluded to earlier? So we got that immutability to protect it, but what happens when something sneaks in? Are we able to find that last clean restore point, so when we do need to recover, we can recover cleanly? So we have the abilities here. We can scan it with Threat Hunter. We can run different YARA rules against these threats, and we can do that kind of stuff with various different means here. So I love the ability here to just jump in, find those clean restore points, and target where we need to actually point to for the recovery. We can do that across the board on all our backups, or one backup at a time, right?
Yeah. So what I like about this feature is this is great if you want to do like an ad hoc type of scan, right? Maybe something was suspicious, you want to double down on it. Maybe you have a specific YARA rule that you want to run. Maybe you're looking for credit card info. It doesn't necessarily have to be a threat when it comes to YARA, or rather, it doesn't have to be what we would traditionally consider a threat, but it could be a threat to things like your governance or your compliance. Now, why do I bring that up? Because we can also automate a lot of these scans using things like a sure backup job. You could have that scheduled, so like go through there and automatically or automagically, if you will, perform a lot of these scans. So that's really cool, right? But we're feeding a lot of information and we've got lots of different signals that we're pulling all this data from. How do you not get overwhelmed with this, Tyler?
Matt, that's where our dashboards really help me out. Use them a lot when I was, on the other side of the fence, and I'm trying to identify what's going on in my environment. That threat center that we have here within V1 is fantastic. We got that recon integration right here to give you that extra visibility into threats or attacks that might be happening within your environment. And you can see here, we got some dashboards. This is our lab, folks out there. You're looking at this going, Tyler, why don't you have a better immutability score? And Matt, I don't have a good answer for them. We got to up our game here, right? But yeah, we get to see at a glance what's going on.
Yeah, one of the fun things is it's a lab. We break a lot of stuff all the time, right? And part of that is just a matter of making sure that, the product does what it says it does on the tin. So Tyler, to your point, it also wouldn't be very exciting if this was all green, because let's face it, that's not very realistic. Now, kind of doing that little bit of a callback to, things that are coming in 13.1, we touched on it briefly 2 weeks ago, and we saw it during the keynote as well, right? So the threat detection that we have today, we're actually expanding that to NAS workloads. So we'll be able to start finding threats in those NAS environments, things that you might just be, backing up today as a file share, for example. We can start looking for threats in there. And we're also expanding on what we're able to do with the cloud threat detection. So today we can already perform threat detection on cloud backups that we're taking. We're actually, once again, kind of increasing the depth and the tools that we're applying to that as well. Now, you have something to add to that, Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of, I think you answered the question without intending to answer the question. We had, a question come in from X on which workloads are already supported. So, if Matt didn't clearly answer that, please honk back at us and we will give you a more defined answer there. But moving on, what's some other things we can do with Veeam? We've got what we call, our data portability story, the workload mobility. And what does that mean from a perspective of looking at your backups here? And so we were able to here, if you look, we can restore an entire VM to multiple different platforms. And you're going to tell me, Tyler, why don't you have all the platforms listed here in the side? And, it's a great question. And we get that a lot, right? We've got HP, Morpheus, we've got Proximus, we've got Nutanix, but There's so many more that we support. Why they're not showing up here, we also got the clouds. I can't forget the clouds. But we're not showing them all because there's plugins you have to install. If you are looking for a different hypervisor, we don't necessarily have them all baked in here right away, but you can easily find the plugins on veeam.com, get them in. So if you're looking for a different workload to protect, um, such as Hyper-V. Hyper-V isn't listed here. I'm actually kind of surprised my Hyper-V isn't listed here. But if you got the other workloads that you want to protect, we've got that here. And Matt, when it comes down to protecting additional workloads, right now with 13.1, we're going to be able to protect up to 95% of the hypervisors out there on the market today. So when you're looking at needing that overall data protection strategy, we've got you covered wherever you want to go. But what about those other few that need to come along, right? We've got what we call the Universal Hypervisor API. And Matt, what is that Universal Hypervisor API? Why do the folks at home need to know about this? What does that give them?
Well, so it's a really interesting concept in that, as you mentioned, Tyler, we today protect all the major hypervisors out there, right? 95% of them. And it's not even just a matter of protection when we say that we support it. It's a matter of we support it, which means if we back it from one platform, we can actually restore it to that platform as well. So it's more than just your traditional backup. It's really about making sure that you own your data, regardless of which platform you're on today, you're on tomorrow, whatever it is, you own that data. So going back to the Universal Hypervisor API, what is that? It's a framework that Veeam has designed so that we could work with partners out there to easily onboard new hypervisors that we don't support today, as well as have a baseline set of criteria as far as what functionality it will have as part of that. So where this gets interesting is going back to the, hey, you know what, maybe you've got this somewhat, pigeonholed, random, but extremely specialized hypervisor that you would really love Veeam to integrate with. This is a perfect opportunity to reach out to that hypervisor vendor and say, hey, reach out to the Alliances folks at Veeam. They've got this API that you could probably help work with. And that's kind of how you start to get the ball rolling on some of these new integrations. So it's really a fantastic way to start onboarding new hypervisors at a much faster rate, as well as provide consistency with what we can do with each of those. But at the end of the day, the story still comes back to the same. Yes, backup is a key part of this, but what about recovery, right? Where can you recover it to? Because that source infrastructure may not always be available.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. And one of the hypervisors that's coming, we'll throw a nod out there to Red Hat OpenShift Virtualization. That's going to be coming in 13.1. But there's so many more that I'd love to tell you all about today. But just stay tuned, and we're going to have more coming soon. And one thing I want to also point out is that instant recovery. So you can migrate and protect once you've migrated. But what happens if you need that quick DR plan to something like Microsoft Azure? Maybe you don't have that secondary DR site, and you just need something to be able to spin up, or you're going to the cloud and you need to get there with your workloads. We've got that ability to do that instant recovery to Microsoft Azure. But Matt, I love talking about so many features. I think we've talked about enough because we're kind of running out of time. We've got so many more topics to talk about here. So I know there's some topic here when we're talking about GRC, or governance, risk, and compliance. And man, Matt, I know you love governance, risk, and compliance. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that? What does that mean?
So that's a topic that I find myself talking more and more to folks about. And a lot of it comes down to, okay, yes, you could schedule your backup jobs, you could test them, but it's really about you maybe have some very strict rules that you need to follow through with, right? Maybe it's regulatory compliance. Maybe there's data residency, data sovereignty that comes into play. Ultimately, depending on which verticals you're in, you might have some government mandated ones. There might be financial penalties. There might even be personal liabilities if you basically break these rules. So it's really a very important topic. Now, part of this is also around the fact that a lot of the time it's very prescribed in what needs to be done to achieve this compliance. So, we'll go do a little bit of a little tangent here, but we're going to talk about post-quantum cryptography. Now, that's a term, I heard it once again a few times during conversations at the Palo Alto Ignite tour here in Toronto. And folks were kind of surprised to hear that, Veeam's already got a plan in place. But before we dive into that part, Tyler, why don't you give us a quick high-level overview of what PQC is and why it matters?
Well, when you're talking about post-quantum cryptography, the real, the crux of the situation is that right now, quantum computing isn't at the point where it can really break anything. Like it's still very much in its early stages, but it's advancing rapidly. And the risk around that is that somebody might be able to break different encryption protocols. So what does that actually mean for you at home? The real threat is that it can do, they'll store now and decrypt later. So if somebody gets into your data, is able to exfiltrate your data, they may hold on to it for years until the technology is at a point where they can now decrypt it. So, this is a great Google article here talking about that post-quantum cryptography and that store now, decrypt later attacks. But we also have the ability to protect a lot of your backups today with that PQC. So here's a great blog we have right now. You can see it from some wonderful folks here at Veeam. And they've kind of outlined what it is and what you can do today to protect yourself and protect your backups. And want to reiterate that our backups are already protected. The level of encryption we have is already deemed to be quantum resilient. So we've talked a lot about PQC, but it's a fascinating topic because when you start talking about quantum computing, everybody wants to hear more about it, right? So we want to give you a bit of a shout out to that because it really ties into that governance, risk, and compliance because there's a very real risk out there to have your data potentially at risk for quantum attacks. But, Matt, when we talk about a lot of that, what can we do today for to show a little bit more in the lab on what they can do to reduce their risks?
Yeah, absolutely. Before we hop back into the lab, question for the folks out there. I'd love to hear this. Is PQC on your radar? We're monitoring the socials on Facebook, on X, on LinkedIn. But is this something that you're tracking? Right? Because this is something that's becoming more and more real. As Tyler mentioned, a lot of this is about guarding against, harvest now, decrypt later type of attacks. And, the way we store our backups today, they are that quantum resistant, quantum resilient. So that's not a big deal, right? But there's all sorts of other components. And, once again, the Veeam keynote, we kind of touched a little bit on that with the hybrid FIPS and PQC and what that means for customers. So we're well on the road to ensuring that customers have what they need. But it's also interesting to know, is this on the radar? Now, going back to the GRC conversation that we were having before we went on this PQC tangent, and apologies for all the acronyms, Tyler, let's talk about this, right? One of the things we commonly need to do when it comes to, proving GRC is, hey, I can actually recover my backups, right? If something happens, we are covered and these backups actually work. Not just a successful job, but they actually recovered. So what do you got here? How's that help me, basically achieve this?
Right. So one of the things that you're always going to hear, and it's funny, I watching the Reddit, I love the programming humor subreddit, and somebody's like, the question was testing backups. And that immediately made me think, well, people need to absolutely be testing your backups, but let's face it, nobody has the time in their day to sit there and do a restore every single day for every single workload just to make sure you're testing. So what can we do from within Veeam to get you there faster? And I think, I in previous episodes, I've had trouble zooming in, and now in this episode, I am zooming in too far. But let's bring this back out here and just show you a bit of that sure backup wizard here. So we're going to, Matt is for sure going to be backing up his jobs, and he's going to for sure have this kind of recovery wizard. So sure backup gives you the ability to automatically recover your VMs, get them into a boot screen, and validate that your systems are coming up, booting up, and able to do different things that you need to do when you're going through a restore. So we got this little wizard here. I'll quickly burn through it because, Matt, we are like we're going over time.
Hmm.
Folks, you are coming with me. We are in this together for a little while. Um, One of the checkboxes I like here is the keeping the application group running after the job completes. And Matt, I know you have a great story to tell from when you were a customer of why you would want to do that.
Oh, I loved using these environments for tests. So, for example, we had an ERP system that had to be upgraded each and every year with the annual patch, fix not just bug fixes, but new tax codes and stuff like that. So, what I would do is I would actually spin it up using a sure backup job, all the required environment, database server, application server, all that jazz, and then perform the upgrade within that environment. And what that allowed me to do is actually perform a mock upgrade in live data. So if I ran into an error, I knew I would have to do the fix the error, and then I could do that in production before I started the actual process. So it was super, super helpful, right? And one of the other things that's great about Sure Backup is it can actually run automated tests. So say you're testing a DNS server, AD, all that sort of stuff, SMTP, you can actually ensure that not only is the VM booted, but that those ports are open, that they're listening. So it's really about testing applications as well, not just the fact that it will boot up. But I digress. We are back here once again, full circle, going back to the threat detection. You'll see this is an option that you're able to actually include as part of Sure Backup. So it's kind of cool in that regard, in that you can automatically make sure that you can recover, but you can also make sure that you can automatically ensure recoverability and that you're clean as part of this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you can also check that backup integrity because bit rot can happen, right? You can have, drive failures, you can have issues with the different mechanical systems that run all your computers today. So you want to make sure that your backup integrity is checked as well. And you can do that right here on an automated basis. But Matt, what if you need more than just this, right? What if we need to do it on a more automated basis?
Well,
You know,
guess what? We've got a tool for that, Veeam Recovery Orchestrator, and where it really shines is recovery at scale. So sure, backup, yes, it could do its thing, but what happens if you've got larger jobs, more complexity? You need to bring things up in specific orders. Maybe you've got customized scripts that you need to run, and going back to the whole data portability thing, what if you need to take your backups and say restore your data center into Azure? VRO can actually help you do that. But what's really cool is all the testing and the dynamic documentation that spits out. I'm a former operations person. I know I hated doing documentation with a passion because it's boring, it's error prone, and it's something that as soon as you finish, it's probably outdated. So, Tyler, what are you showing us here?
right. So, I had the dashboard up before, but now I'm jumping into the reporting section here, and you can see all the different reports that can be generated from the different jobs that we run on a regular basis here within our lab. But you click one of those reports and we get into like the readiness check. And we're talking before the show here, Matt, and I really like this report because it gives you real usable information. It's not just a pretty report. It actually provides value. So when you're looking at your target RPO for your job, we have a job here. We got a target RPO of 24 hours. Are we actually meeting that RPO when we try to recover? And that's important, right? You have your leadership team, they're asking you, Matt, can we recover? We need to have these systems up and running in a certain time. This is our RTOs, these are our RPOs. Can we actually meet those? And these reports give you the ability to show them, hand it back off to your leadership team saying, guys, we've got this covered. You are in good hands here with Veeam. And then we've got another report here, the plan execution report. This kind of gives you a bit of an overview of the plans itself. And Matt, tell us a little bit more. What do you like about this one?
Oh, well, what I really like about, all of these is that this is like production level information. And I say that in the sense of it goes through and it checks these things, or it goes through and performs these actions in the sandbox. So you'll see things like, total runtime or, to your point, RPOs. That is actually based on your environment. So it's not just an estimate or anything like that. It's a matter of these are numbers that you can count on, and it goes back to that whole proof point of being able to prove, hey, we've got a 24-hour, RPO, we can actually meet that and recover. So it's really, really cool how basically all this is generated for you. It's something you could print off, something you could schedule for an email, hand it to your auditor, hand it to your boss, and say, yes, we are protected. Here are all the steps that we went through. Here's basically, everything that we need to ensure that we're doing the best we can. Now, on the side note, also compliance also comes, in the form sometimes of retaining data. And I say that in the sense of depending on what you're doing, maybe it's healthcare records, you need to retain them for a long time. So for the keen-eyed viewers out there who, once again, Veeam or the press release for 13.1, you may have caught something in there around NAS archival. So that's going to be a way for you to actually retain that NAS information. Don't confuse with the NAS threat detection that we talked about earlier, but retain that information for longer terms with a much basically lower budget. So that's a real big quality of life feature that's coming that will actually directly help your budgets as well. So Tyler, they're going to cut us off here pretty soon. We're running well over our usual runtime. So hopefully there was something in there that folks found useful. We'll keep an eye on the comments, on the questions after the fact. If you've got suggestions for futures episode that you want to see something on, feel free to drop that in there. But we're not done yet, right? We want to leave you with 2 resources that you can actually start using today to kind of further the Veeam journey for you, whether that's a matter of learning about new features, or maybe it's a matter of, basically trying to understand how does this all fit together. So Tyler, what do you have for us?
One of my favorite things that I've seen various different vendors do is put out the hands-on labs. I love the hands-on labs because let's face it, everybody out there has a test environment, but not everybody has a separate production environment. So when you're in those situations where you want to try out some of these new features, Matt showed you a lot on the Veeam Recovery Orchestrator reports. You're probably thinking, there's probably some Veeam 1 reports out there. There's different tools you want to set up. Maybe there's a sure backup job that you've been kind of struggling to figure out yourself. We've got a bunch of different hands-on labs here directly available to you. You just hit the request on the lab, things get spun up in the background, and then you can start playing. And my favorite thing about hands-on labs is being able to go off script. So you got the scripted guidance where you can go through, that learning process together and try to figure out something there. But if you want to go away from that and just, burn the world down and see what happens, that's what a hands-on lab just becomes so beautiful to dive into. I, love doing them. Love a great way to just learn without risk, right? But then what are the other resources? Is there some place that people can go to maybe get more training, more education on what they can do?
Absolutely. So we just relaunched the VMCE, the VMCE Plus as it's known now. Brand new, launched June 1st. So it's got, basically a different layout, different approach to the traditional VMCE. So lots of information available. You can see Tyler's got it up here on the screen. Tyler, anything to add about the VMCE Plus?
Absolutely. Matt, it's a great program. I'm VMCE certified. I love going through it. It teaches you a lot about the program, a lot about the product that you may not have actually known about, and things that Matt and I just can't cover all within a 38-minute episode. We are super over time, Matt. But, one of the extra things I like is the stuff Veeam does here with the Empower Her VMC. So if you're a woman in tech and you want to learn more about Veeam, you want to get certified, there's a great program here that has launched. Emily Tejas has a great LinkedIn post that she talked about how it really helped her and empower her in technology. Brilliant, brilliant people out there. And it's a great way to just get extra certification there. So if you're trying to learn a little bit more about Veeam, why don't you, check this out? Great tools out there. But there's also, let me quickly slide through here. This is what you kind of get with that VMCE certification. Bringing it back to this, you get that VMCE Plus bundle. So you learn a lot about the Veeam backup replication, Veeam 1, Veeam Orchestrator, and you can go through and just get really well educated, and trained. Helps you a lot in your day to day. I mean, it accelerated my career quite a bit once I got certified.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I think we're past time. Where should folks go next, right? Veeam recordings are still available. If you want to check out the keynote from the New York City Veeam event, it's still there. There's still some breakout sessions available online. Those will be available, I believe, until the 12th of June. So you still got a little bit of time left. Once again, there's some sneak peek about what's coming in 13.1 there. We tried to sprinkle some of that stuff in here today. But yeah, I mean, with that, thanks for joining us today. Our next episode's July 9th. If you have ideas of what you would love to see or hear during that time or before that time, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. You can @ the Veeam social account and they can get that routed to us. But yeah, Tyler, any closing words?
I always love doing these episodes. Love being able to chat with you and share this knowledge with everybody out there. And yeah, like Matt said, drop us a note on the Goose Line. Let us know, what we can talk about, what you want to see. This show, we're doing this for you. I love doing it, but I want to know what you guys want to hear from us. So please drop us a note. And there's more Veeam events and more Veeam tours coming. So check us out on veeamon.com, and you can check us out here. There is some online events and some Veeam coming to your area. So if you've enjoyed seeing us, please like and subscribe. I think that's what the cool kids say these days. Check us out next time on Between Two Geeks.
Thanks all.